Well,
50. We hit 50. So
awesome.
there
All
it
right.
goes.
That's what I was looking
52. We
for.
are 52. Okay.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, hello and welcome. Great to see we have participants joining us from all over the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. On behalf of Contact North, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the webinar, How to Use Shared Online Video, Podcasts, and Webcasts to Engage Online Learners. My name is Sarah Govero. I'm the Director of Teach Online and the Online Learning News at Contact North, and I will be moderating the session today. So before we begin, I'd like to start off with our provincial land acknowledgement, respectfully acknowledging that Contact North's work and the work of our community partners takes place on traditional Indigenous territories across the province. We are grateful to be able to work and live in these territories. We are thankful to the First Nations, the Métis, and the Inuit people who have cared for this territory since time immemorial, and who continue to strengthen Ontario and all the communities across the province. So thank you. All right, just a few housekeeping items before we get going. The chat is open. Just remember to select the everyone on the pull down menu so that we all can see your questions, comments. But if you do have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A tool. You find that at the bottom of the screen, and we'll use that to address the questions. You will also see a little upvote icon, which is a little thumbs up icon found at the bottom of the screen. If you click on that, that just means that question resonates with you, and it will bring it to the top of the queue and will be answered more quickly than the others. I also like to point out we have closed captioning. You can activate that through the closed caption tool at the bottom of your screen. And once the webinar has finished, I'll post the link to the recording as well as presentation slides to teachonline.ca, and I'll put that link in the chat momentarily. You'll also get the link emailed to you about 24 hours after the Zoom system has processed it. So anyways, I usually get to it a little bit quicker, so that will be up in the next hour or so after the presentation is over. All right, enough from me. On to the main event. I would like to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Curtis Bonk, professor at the School of Education and adjunct professor at the School of Informatics at Indiana University. Welcome, Curtis, and thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's great to be here again for Contact North. I would love to be up in Canada sometime doing a show. Maybe that can be arranged. I want to give a shout out to Ray Schroeder, who's a writer for Inside Higher Ed. You can read them every month or sometimes every week for free. So sign up for Inside Higher Ed. I'll give you a little plug there, Ray. Ray's also here with Vicki Cook and Michelle Gribbins. She is Michelle's my doc student, and Vicki has just gotten promoted. So three people from University of Illinois Springfield, where it's 1 hour earlier, 9 a.m. But we have people from China where it's 11 o'clock at night. No one yet from Korea where it's midnight tonight. Some people say it's midnight tonight. So I want to thank people for signing up. My former student Fong has signed up. Hyung Mi Lee, who will be doing a podcast for Contact North in a few weeks. She signed up. Sheila Jaganathan from the World Bank. Bob Brommer from the military. We've got a whole bunch of people I want to thank, and I can't get through my entire list, but Hee Jung An, George Valencianos, who gave a few talks for Contact North. And the list goes on, and my current students. So today we're going to talk about something I've been doing for the past 3 years with a purpose, because friends of mine said, why don't you join me in doing a podcast show? And so I bought this Yeti, which no longer works with this computer. But anyhow, this was what I was using to do podcast shows. I'm going to come back to that briefly. This talk will have 5 parts to it. And it's just been put together late last night. So let's see if I can get all 5 situated here. So we'll be going through different podcast shows and how to use them, right? To start off this day with. We'll be talking about shared online video and how to use that. We'll be talking about how to create channels for yourself or playlists We'll be talking about how to anchor your instruction with those shared online videos. And we'll be talking about webcasts as well, podcasts, webcasts, and YouTube-like channels or video channels, if you will. So let me go and share my slides and see if I can call them up again. And I do have the Contact North slide to start. I have my emails listed there. These slides will be posted at trainingshare.com. If you can't write things down quick enough, go to TrainingShare, one word, TrainingShare. Go under Archive Talks, and you can find this talk as well as the one I did for Lori, who's with us here from China a couple of weeks ago for Fudan University and her university in a partnership. That was a great experience. Yeah, that was fun. So today's warm-up question in the chat: do you feel A, great, like Superman and Superwoman? B, good, really good. Okay. C, a little tired, but still fine. D, not sure, but you're glad you're here. E, not fully here nor there. I have some personal issues that need to be sorted out. F, you're overwhelmed and you're feeling lost in a lost world. Or G, other. And I'm curious if there's some things posted there. Sarah, if you could read a couple of those, because I'm not in the chat at the moment, but I guess I could call that up here. So we see some C's. Oh, a lot of honest C and D people in the room here. And a couple of B's. Thank you. Cheryl's at Cheryl, hopefully we can save you from that. A couple F's, okay, and B's, okay. A 4. 4 was not possible, Maria. It was A, B, C, D, or E, F. Okay, let's try a couple more here. Warm-up questions that we'll have. I'm going to have a giveaway to start off. And so the first time I spoke for Contact North, I mentioned my free book, Adding Tech Variety, which is at techvariety.com, TEC Variety. That's got 100 activities for teaching online. The Commonwealth of Learning in Vancouver published a new version, an updated version, a few weeks ago called Motivating and Supporting Online Learners with a Free Course. So there's a free book and free class. And so I said free 3 times. And Sarah said, if I say free 3 times, I'll get good evaluations. If you didn't write this down, again, fast enough, write me an email and I'll send you the PDF of the free book. I'll send you both of them. I'll fairly quickly respond if I'm not all jogging. I've been running up 977 days in a row. And from those runnings, I've created a daily calendar of where I've run, along with a daily calendar of my dog running with me. Oh, God. So if I'm not running, I will respond. There is also a free class, and the class will take you through the 100 different activities and how to use them in your courses, how to flip the classroom, how to have a jigsaw activity, how to do role play, how to have some kind of word cloud interactivity activities. So anyways, a couple of things that's not part of my talk, but I thought, what the heck, I'd show you that anyways. Well, let's start off with the talk. Yesterday or the day before, I got an email from the Open Courseware Consortium from MIT. And MIT is what started this world of openness because Charles Vess, the president of MIT, said on April 4th, 2001, let's make online learning free. Let's make MIT free. And I was happy because I got a 19 in the ACT. I couldn't get into MIT, I couldn't get into Lower Potomac State University with my test scores. I went to University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. Ray knows where that is. They didn't require an ACT. But today, in this world, we have a lot of open access. I wrote this book, The World is Open, about a decade or so ago that talked about that. But today, we have so many new opportunities that weren't even available when I wrote that book in 2009, I guess it was. So this little article talked about the fact there are, almost 40 million people who had some college but haven't finished it. In places like where Ray Schroeder's at University of Illinois Springfield, they were trying to help people finish their degrees by offering blended learning courses at night for working full-time people who can take online or face-to-face or both. And during the pandemic, people were exploring the possibilities of learning online. And they're learning from these YouTube videos, micro-credentials, short snippets of learning. When you're working full-time, taking a degree program is daunting, really daunting. There's a lot of financial burdens too that have to be overcome. So people like this gentleman in Uzbekistan, he was dabbling in YouTube videos and using podcast shows and created his own YouTube video show. He was a YouTuber, I guess they call him. And then he turned to, taking some open courseware, some classes from MIT through open courseware, free and open contents. And increasingly today, we find people who are exploring the edges of their learning possibilities through open videos and open podcast shows and open books and animations and other things. He's just one of hundreds of millions of people who are exploring the free and open world. Lifelong learning today, the 60-year curriculum, as my former student Rovi Brandon talks about. And I'll come back to Rovi here towards the end. And if we have all this content, we now need to be curators. And so last time, the third time I spoke for Contact North, I talked about my Education 2020 model, having 20 new roles of instructors and 20 instructional principles that mesh together to create a Education 3.0 or 4.0 platform where the student, it's more student-centered. And so we're all curators. Anyone who's an instructor today is curating the golden nuggets and putting them on display, right? And so there are many other roles besides curator that are important. A teacher as concierge and coach and consultant and caregiver, because we have some people who put F and E on the list there. They have some psychosocial emotional issues they're dealing with and struggling with. And they need some psychological support before they ever enter into a classroom setting again, or a virtual one as well. So instructor roles are changing dramatically in front of our eyes. Curator is but one of them. But curator today is probably the most important one because we're talking about podcast shows, right? But there's also 20 instructional principles that are extremely important that I'm calling the last principles instruction, the learning activation system template. So how do we use podcast shows for meaningful, engaging, authentic, relevant learning? That's what I'll talk about here today. How do we empower learners? How do we give them a sense of autonomy and give them feedback for what they have selected, what they've chosen to interact and engage with in terms of those videocasts, webcasts, podcasts, and so forth. But they're available to all of us as soon as we have an internet connection. Even if we don't, we can download and listen or watch later on when we're running like I am in the woods later on after the show. So in the chat window, I want you to name one or two of your favorite podcasts or webcasts or video channel shows. What ones have you listened to that you enjoy, that you want to recommend to other people? I'm just curious what people are saying in here. Thank you, Ray. Yeah, the world is wide open and hopefully fully charged and engaged. Thank you, Julie and so Linda. Faculty Focused Podcast, Radiocast. Hey, Jun Cho, who just got a job at Bowling Green in Ohio. She graduated from Florida State. Congratulations. She said TED Talks. Robert McKenzie's live with us today. Inga, The Hidden Brain. Faculty Focus Live, and I'll say don't call BS, calling BS. So we have a number of TED Talks. It's mentioned a number of times here so far, so TED Talks is among the ways. I'm just curious, Sarah, how many people do we have with us here so far? I think 68 people are with us here. Good. So we'll have another opening activity here. If you have a blog, this is time to promote your blog or your podcast or your videocast show. Put the show up there in lights and headlights and glitter and all that kind of stuff. So what's the name of your pod? Ray's got like 5 podcasts or blogging websites. He's the king of blogs. So Ray, put your blog up here. Great Minds on Learning we've got in here. Okay, who's got the Great Minds? Skip, good to have you with us, Skip. So we've got 25 years of ed tech, Julie Mayer. And we've got Made for U of T. I'm not sure Made of U of T, but Inga Breed has Made of U of T. That's the engineering podcast show, potentially. Parev Sharma, he's got a couple of things he's working on for teaching English for people in South Asia. I'll talk about that near the end today. Vicky, thank you for coming. Vicky, I posted curated articles on Twitter and LinkedIn. So she curates LinkedIn, at least, and Twitter, at least for today, Twitter exists, Vicky. So yeah, I will have the Teaching English in Uzbekistan link later on today. Great, thank you everyone. Okay, so last question here for a while. And I'm wondering if how much have you used podcasts and webcasts in your teaching? Put A if you've never done so. Put B if you've done it a couple of times, maybe just once. Put C if you've done it many times, and E if you do it all the time. I'm just curious. It could be any way in which you're using them. Just could be an option, could be required, could be student generated or promoted. Well, just any ways in which you might have used them. So we've got an A, Hijing. You're a new instructor, Hijing, and so you'll be using them a lot after this session, hopefully. So some people say D. Okay, so some C's. Ramesh, good to have you with you, Ramesh. Hijang and from William Patterson University ran a great conference last week on educational technology. Take a look at their website. Julie, a B, okay, all of you, wow, people are using, so I think what I'm reading here is people are using webcasts and podcasts. It's now, how do you use them? And for what purpose are we using them? Yesterday, I got, Ray Schroeder's friends sending me two, webinars that I could sign up for. Every day, Inside Higher Ed sends me something to sign up for. These things are made available, and often they are free, and they're not only free for you, they're going to be free for your students as well. And so these are the kinds of things you want to curate and find to have as supplemental resources, at least for your students. They bring in celebrities. I mean, you look at the list here of the people Inside Higher Ed brings in, and register now for free to hear all these people that, in the old days, we have to go to university and pay tons of money to listen to. But today we have all these folks coming from around the world, so why not? Why not? Part one. So now we're into part one. And now we'll talk about our podcast shows that some of you sent me on email during the past few days, your favorite podcast shows. And so I'm put a few of these in here in part one. And you might recognize the one that you nominated. But if you haven't nominated, or if you haven't used podcast shows, take a look at some of these lists of the best educational podcast shows out there. Of course, many of you mentioned NPR, and some of you mentioned NPR's TED Talk radio hour. So you doubled up with TED Talks and NPR. And by the way, every single one of these I listened to during the past few days to verify the quality of the program itself. And so I'm endorsing all of this stuff, whether it's YouTube or Adobe for Education, which has more of a K-12 contents to it, as well as Google for Education. Now, my podcast show, Silver Lining for Learning, will have Google for Education people on the show in January. I'm going to look for the date here, January 7th, I believe, at 5:30 p.m. So just type in Silver Lining for Learning. They're going to announce a new report, a new education report for Google. So if you're interested, pop into that show. I had one person who says, my favorite education channel is the TED platform. I enjoy the talks that help me learn English better because I'm from China. And she's studying at Kansas, the University of Kansas. And so she nominated, and I listened to this particular one on how to free up time. I've got a few tips from it. There are many other ones that I listen to, TED Talks, that also I get engaged from. I always get engaged from these TED Talks. This is yesterday, someone had sent me this. I always get Daniel Pink's emails. If you haven't read a book from Daniel Pink, he is a former speechwriter for Al Gore. and apparently it didn't work so well. So he became a writer. If you don't know American politics, Al Gore lost. Well, he really won, but then he lost. And then he won again, and then he lost again. Anyways, Daniel Pink has 3 or 4 books, one called Drive that explains intrinsic motivation. Another book, To Sell is Human. He has many books. I recommend all of them. The one called Drive, it explains volition and passion and purpose in life. And after he's done these books, he creates these 1-minute Pinkcasts that kind of goes through current issues of today, or problems, or things he's thinking about or writing about that really are engaging. And it just takes a minute to listen to. So, he has ones on how to overcome ugly problems and annoying things, this is how note-taking apps can reduce anxiety and raise your productivity. Those are the kinds of things, the short little things. So I recommend Daniel Pink. I also recommend my friend Michael Horn. And if you haven't read Michael Horn's book, Disrupting Class, that he wrote with Clayton Christensen about 15 or so years ago, pick that book up because it's still relevant today. And we had Michael Horn in our show, Silver Lining for Learning, 2 months ago. He's always doing something. If you're into K-12 education and school reform, he's almost a must. He's a very interesting person. He's dabbling in so many different aspects of change in education, changing the schedules, changing curriculum, rethinking teaching, rethinking learning, whatever. Another place that I like is going to Quality Matters. I think Ray and Vicky and Michelle will also be using that quite a bit there at Springfield, and most of you as well, trying to ramp up your online courses and make them better. Now, we had the execs from Quality Matters in Silver Lining for Learning about a half year ago. And so if you want to hear what they have to say about what Quality Matters is and what they do, type in Silver Lining for Learning Quality Matters, or just go to Quality Matters. This show, someone nominated yesterday. I started watching it and I started sweating it out. I was watching the show. I just literally sweat's pouring down my face and I had to wipe it off my brow. And why do you think, Ramesh, why was I sweating so much? Why was I sweating? Well, because after watching the show, I said to myself, am I going to have a job in 5 years or 10 years? These people are going to create video casts and podcasts. They're just going to replace every undergraduate course in educational technology, every master's course in educational technology, maybe not doctoral courses, but this one was fascinating. And there are tons of these kinds of sites. So my next question for you is, will instructors be replaced by shared online video and audio? Put an A if you think definitely not. A B, I will wait and see. A C, perhaps some instructors might. A D, most entry levels instructors will likely be replaced. An E, all instructors should fear losing their jobs. We'll see what people are saying here in the chat. We've got some C's and some B's. Thank you, Skip. And Paula, my doctoral student Paul is with us here. Ray says A. Definitely not. Thank you, Ray. I've stopped sweating, Ray. Cheryl's with us, my former student out in the California coast, California dreaming. Thank you and Mei Ling says A. Definitely not. Thank you, Mei Ling. Verapon, A. Lori, perhaps. Okay, Lori, thank you very much. Vicky, I think instructors who are unwilling to change will no longer be relevant. Well, that has been true for decades, right? I hope, maybe you had some of those professors in college that weren't relevant. Anyhow, indeed, yes. Okay, thank you very much. So I moved, if you download the slides, this question was going to be earlier. I waited on this one. I moved some slides around just this morning here. But there's other websites for ed tech and learning science and instructional design. My former student is in this particular show, Abby Brown. He's got a radio voice. He had a radio voice as a graduate student. So naturally, he's got a podcast show. And it's a good one. It's a good one. Trends and Issues in Instructional Design, Ed Tech, and Learning Sciences. But there's other ones, Leading Lines, a podcast on Ed Tech. Mark Nichols' podcast. Now, Mark Nichols' podcast is promoted in Contact North. If you get the Contact North newsletter, you'll read about Mark Nichols. He interviewed my friend George Valencianos out in Mount Royal Roads University, Royal Roads in Victoria Island. George will often give talks for Contact North. I highly recommend reading anything by George. But Mark Nichols is interviewing leaders in the field. For some reason, I don't know if he's stooping a little low, but he's interviewing me this coming weekend, so I'll be on Mark Nichols' show coming up. So if you want to hear from people in the ed tech space who's been around for a while and contributing, I'm going to recommend Vicki and Ray and you guys at Springfield to him when I get done. So if you go to George's website, he's trying to summarize what the research really is telling. So he explains what a systematic review of the research is, or what the meta-analysis is, or what social media means for scholarship. He tries to reduce and make sense of what's called translation today. People who are translators of research. Well, George does a great job of that in his research shorts, not his jogging shorts, but his research shorts. And then there's the Daniels. I think one guy's first name is Daniel, the other guy's last name's Daniels. Daniels on research, and they distilled what the research and learning says. And I found this quite interesting and engaging, actually quite humorous. But there's also, if you want to be serious, Learning Scientist podcasts and learn about the motivation literature or self-efficacy literature or whatever it is that you're interested in learning about, and on and on and on. Psychology, how do we learn from Mind Shift? And then you get into K-12 podcast shows like Making Math Moments That Matter, and getting a community of mathematics teachers engaged in the teaching of mathematics, so that they're not the teachers Vicki Cook had, they're really relevant people. They're trying to make their learning relevant for others. And I found this one interesting as well. You go to this one, there's a lot of supplemental things besides the podcast show, including webinars and conferences and other things. And then if you want to get into philosophy, there's Philosophize This. And I listened to the one on optimism. I highly recommend it. It's a great show because I'm an optimistic guy. And then there's the Thinkability podcast show for those who think about their thinking. It's about metacognition and how to teach metacognition or for metacognition. And then a show on psychology says, you are not so smart. And just that title alone turns people off or gets them to come in and listen to why they're not so smart. And you can see some of the shows on the left-hand side there. If you're interested in the war in Ukraine going on right now, you can get, a massive open online course, that's been available for months in Coursera from Yale Online. And so Timothy Snyder, who's been on many TV shows lately, I didn't realize had a MOOC. And so I started watching his MOOC to understand what's going on, the history of the Ukraine area of the world. But this brings up a different point, is that there are many embedded video casts and podcasts in thousands and thousands of MOOCs. I think there were 950 universities offering MOOCs last year to nearly 200 million people. They had almost 20,000 different MOOCs. And so I sometimes have my students watch MOOCs on learning theory when they take my learning theories class, and they write reflections on them. And they watch the video casts and webcasts. So one way to embed video and share it on video or podcast shows is to have students listen or watch and write papers and reflect on them. There are other science-related websites that my friend Hee Jung An sent me, such as this one, Physics Simply Explained, or this one on chemistry, which I should have taken because I never took chemistry as a high school student. I didn't like the instructor, Vicki. He was not relevant. He invented some new way of cooking Oscar Mayer hot dogs, and he was a hot dog. I didn't like him. So you can hear the nutty-haired professor on the bottom there from the University of Nottingham, whose TED Talks won awards, and many other people explain chemistry and do chemistry types of experiments. Or if you're into biology, the Minute Earth, or many other websites, healthcare websites, you name it. Duolingo, I'm doing research on Duolingo right now. There's a podcast show, there are probably many of them, in Duolingo, not just to learn Spanish, but to learn Chinese, to learn French and other kinds of languages. And my friends at Shanghai International Studies University said, you got to look at our website for language education and so forth that's out there. Or my friends at Beijing Normal said, we learn statistics and SPSS through MOOCs. This is how we learn here in Beijing. And there are probably many of you today who are also doing your side learning, your extra learning via the MOOC or via podcast shows and so forth. And I said earlier, we have a couple people with us today, including Ramesh Sharma, who sent me a link to this website, PodMOOCs. So combining podcasts and MOOCs together, MOOCs through podcasts. Because often people don't have sophisticated equipment to be able to download everything that's required in a traditional class, but they have the audio capabilities and can download the audio files even on their mobile devices or mobile phones. And they might be able to learn a language this way, like this particular website from Amity University, Tashkent, from Purvan Sharma, who's with us here today. I listened to this one. This is kind of a fun one, actually. The students reflecting on their English training and learning and so forth. And my friend Steve McCarty from Japan has Japan Casting. So, around the world, there are podcast shows. And so I want you to type in today for me, how can you use podcasts in your classroom? So just in the chat window, how can you use podcasts in your classroom? I'm just curious what you all might have to say about that. And let's see what people have said. Alternative assessments, Celinda, thank you. Christina, to foster discussion or reflection. No, great. So two ideas right away there on how to use podcasts. Carrie, interviewing industry experts and professionals out there. Yeah. Skip, get students to do a simulation of producing a podcast. Of course, Skip, that's in my list. Lori, invite students to teach. Yeah, to create a podcast show of their own. Bringing in experts. I'm going to have tons of those expert ideas in then part 2 and part 3 here. Thanks, Ray. Ask students to do simulations in English. Job interviews, mock tests. Parviv Sharma, thank you very much. Anyone else? Anyone else? Activate their schema. So yeah, I'm going to come back to this, Virpan. Activating schema through short snippets of video, getting them primed for future lessons or future questions or other activities. Thank you all. Okay, so I've got my list of some things of how to use podcast shows. Having students remix the episodes into themes and looking for common issues or controversies that might have been raised. Having students have competitions of favorite podcast shows that they might have. And then having them nominate podcast shows for your class, or when they finish the class as a final activity, have them recommend for next semester, have them recommend what you might replace with a podcast show. And as Ray said, or someone said, reenactments, have them do their own podcast. And Lori mentioned this as well, so having students maybe interview the podcast hosts or the guests of the podcast that they listen to write them an email and so forth. But the number one way I'm using it is number 1 and number 10, replacing course readings with podcasts. I think Patrick's with us. He's in my R622 Designing Learning Environments class, replacing course readings and supplementing lectures and presentations. Those are easy ways to blend your learning. Ray Shorter is a blended learning guy. He's one of my friends. He was the blended learning person in the whole country for a while, right? So he would believe that. So now in opening activity, type in the chat window, what are some benefits of using podcasts in your classroom? I'm curious what the benefits you see of using podcasts. And will this chat stream? So this will be available later on. Yeah. This will be available. Oh, Skip put his link in there. So do link to Skip's link that he put in for you. Increasing engagement. Yep. Generating content. Skip says, we got to generate content. We got, students in charge. Yep. Current, as Ray said, timely information and fostering some sense of the 3 C's, critical thinking, creative thinking, and collaboration. Annie and Parviv said, that's the digital skills of the 21st century. It's not passive reception of this audio files and video files. We have to activate, engage, and foster interaction and working around their schedule, as Janice says. Of course, we have people who prefer video or audio or hands-on or other things, as Kara points out. So activating the learning process, Verapon says. So yeah, what are the benefits? Well, if you read Palenque 2016, she talks about expanding vocabulary. I listen to audiobooks in my car because I did score a 19 in the ACT, and I'm always trying to expand my vocabulary, right? I want to improve my language. So I use Collins Dictionary from the UK because they have different words than US dictionaries, and the thesaurus, the thesaurus, as my dad said. Use Collins. It's great. It's got words you never heard before if you're not British. Skip's he's from the US. He's living in Britain. He knows Collins probably very well. So you can get actively engaged in learning and maybe chunk that learning into short snippets so that students can focus their attention better. And self-paced, someone said, to learn on their own independently and then reflect on that learning. It's in the reflection and explanations that happen wherein learning occurs. I used to be an educational psychologist till they kicked me out. And educational psychologists believe in reflection and explanation, elaboration, right? Organization of contents, making taxonomies and timelines and concept maps, all these things to structure knowledge, right? And so an alternative to the readings, number 9, I really think number 9 is critical in this age of self-determined learning. Self-directed learning. And by the way, I just published a piece with Mena Ju from Wayne State, my former advisee, on 15 guidelines to foster self-directed learning. And if anyone has the link to that or has my article I sent them, put it in the chat window for everyone else, because I didn't have that with me handy, or send me an email. But we have a follow-up that's also just been accepted. So I have 2 pieces talking about how to foster self-directed learning. Lindsay Patterson in The Cult of Personality, Why You Should Bring Podcasts into Your Classroom, says, because like Ray says, they're current, they're timely, they're portable. Someone else says we can learn on our own. And listening, as I said, reshapes your brain. I mean, you get new content in, and you can support multimedia for learning. You don't have too much media, as Richard Mayer says, but you have a couple forms of media. And my friend Donald Clark in the UK was interviewed for Online EduCup Berlin, and his interview was about why should podcasts be used in learning. I highly recommend you read that piece from my brilliant friend Donald Clark, who has a blog called Plan B. If you want to read an interesting blog about learning theory and everything else in Sun and Moon, his blog Plan B, or his new podcast show, The Learning Hack. And his recent show that came out this morning was on 4 religious leaders, Confucius, Muhammad, Buddha, and Christ, Jesus Christ, on what they have to say about learning and learning and instruction. Actually, it's kind of fascinating. So part 2, I'm just finally on to part 2, but this is going to be a quick part. This is about my podcast show, Silver Lining for Learning. Punya Mishra, Chris Deedy from Harvard, Punya from Arizona State, Young Zhao from University of Kansas, and I run a podcast show each week. Initially, Scott McLeod at University of Colorado, Denver, and Shengyi Chen from East China Normal joined us. And we've been going for over 2 years, nearly 3 years. And we just got a couple recognitions at AECT for this show. We weren't intending this to go beyond 2 months. We thought the pandemic would be over in 2 months. And so Young Zhao said, let's just do a podcast show for 2 months on the future of ed and keep teachers listening while they're at home for 2 months. We'll talk about alternative models. And we all signed up. Little do we know, we're still going every Saturday, typically at 5:30 Eastern. And so we've had, my good friend Sanjaya Mishra from the Commonwealth of Learning. And if you haven't read Sanjaya, he's got many books on open educational resources. And he just did the free book, the new version of the Tech Variety book. And we had my good friend Paul Kim talk about the SMILE program, the Stanford Mobile Inquiry Learning Environment that evaluates levels of questions and asks questions at different levels. He's got the pocket school project, or your teachers in your pocket. So we had kids on one show explaining their high school projects that blew us all away. There's hope for the world. If you listen to episode 15, you'll just be amazed of what's possible, what's coming. We had young people from different parts of Africa talk about virtual learning and virtual worlds and what's happening there. And of course, we had Maxime Jean-Louis from Contact North, who runs Contact North, talk about the vision and dreams and the past of the history of Contact North. We called Making Contact with Contact North, which is the sponsor of today's show. Thank you, Maxime. We also had my friends from the Open U of the Philippines, the Open U of Indonesia, University of Tubuka, Open Cyber Thailand, we had Open U of Malaysia. All these folks come in to talk about open and online learning in East and Southeast Asia. So that was a great show from my friends Zaraini and Tian and Melinda and so forth. We also had the World Bank. Sheila, Jake, and Nathan talk about what's going on in the World Bank in terms of instructional design. And kids in Nepal learning English online was one episode. And they're now learning more than just English online. They're taking dozens and dozens of free classes, and I'm interviewing them for what motivates these young people to learn about paleontology or zoology or chemistry or whatever. It's no longer just English-based. So Nepali high school students, that study we're in the midst of writing up, if anyone's interested. And my friend, Cassandra Brooks, studying the Antarctic toothfish down in Antarctica, of course, and the krill and the loss of the krill in parts of Antarctica. And we had a special show called A Break in the Ice, one person's journey to save the last ocean. We had a show on penguins, Dolly penguins, from my friend Jenny Pennycook. So we've had a number of shows in Silver Lining over the past 2.5 years, including Rovi Brandon talk about the 60-year curriculum. My former student Brian Beatty talk about the high flex model. Now everyone has Brian's picture on their dartboard. If they don't like high flex, they just throw darts at it. If they do like high flex, then maybe they don't have his picture on the dartboard. They have it right next to them, on the wall or something like that. So I recommend typing high flex model and Brian Beatty. You can get his free book on high flex and how to implement that. During the pandemic, it was very popular. We've also had a show on female leaders. My friends and colleagues, Okwa Lee from Korea, In Sung Jung from International Christian University in Tokyo, and Mei Feng Liu from Beijing Normal, all talking about their roles and taking leadership roles and being role models. We had David Wiley, the kind of the founding father of openness, on a show. We had Susie Gronseth from University of Houston talk about her book on universal design for learning. She's, again, another former student of mine. We had folks talk about blended learning and blended learning approaches and the changes in terms of blended learning on one show and one episode. Every 4 weeks, the hosts get together to reflect on prior shows. So you can also listen to that. We've had the metaverse, we had Facebook people on. We've had people talk about MOOCs in India and how to fertilize crops and rotate them in the Egg MOOCs project. So it's a fascinating experience, including episode on Palestine, including an episode of the first 100 shows. So a couple of tips for running podcast shows. It's not easy. Doing a podcast show is not easy, but they're a lot of fun. So plan them out. Contact people that you know, tell them what you're planning to do, and organize a few months in advance of what's possible and what you're going to do. And so think about the future, think about where you're going. Set these up for, you have to plan them 3 months out in advance, or at least 2 months out in advance. You have to send people the links, test things out. Give them some possible questions that you might ask them. Share with them prior shows. Think about getting more than one person for a particular show, or how many people can you fit in a particular show? Have them introduce each other, but give them only a short snippet of time to maybe show some slides or show some websites and whatnot. Have it be a conversation, if you will, if possible. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. We'll see if we can get this up. So a couple of tips there. So how I use these webcast shows in Silver Lining, I have them watch a series of 5 or 10 shows and write reflection papers on them. Look for commonalities, look for suggestions, look for trends, look for, some themes are in those shows. So let them decide which shows they want to watch. So again, watch 1 show and write a reflection paper or review. Watch 5 shows and write a thematic paper, or draft a model of the change process. After watching so many shows, look for models or frameworks or new systems or approaches. Or maybe draft mini papers on the shows into a book of some kind. Have students, each of them draft 1, or in a team, draft a chapter related to that topic. And remix the episodes potentially, and have them create something totally new from that remixing. Have them interview people who have appeared in those shows and potentially tag them, rank them. What we haven't done in Silver Lining, or what we haven't done a good job of, is tagging the shows or categorizing the shows. We started to, but we don't have funding for the Silver Lining show. So we're very limited in what we can do. And if you take a look at the website, it's I think it's pretty cool what we've done so far. Part 3, I want to know why to use, I've got 10 minutes left, why to use shared online video. And a simple statement is to have a macro context, to have a shared space, a shared set of ideas or concepts that people have watched and that you can come back to. So David Ozabel from the University of Illinois, where Ray was at one point, at Champaign, he talked about schema theory and hierarchical structures within one's mind. Well, having a video or an audio file that everyone's watched or seen or listened to is a place that can prime your schema, and it's a place to come back to and engage learners and more richly embed content so that they can elaborate on that content. So dual coding theory, learning things visually and verbally, as Alan Pavio in Canada said. Anchoring the instruction in a short video snippet from CNN or the BBC, as John Bransford said, or multimedia learning, as Richard Mayer said. Many people over the past few decades have talked about multimedia for learning, anchoring the instruction in video clips in mathematics, and then have kids reflect on those mathematics videos that my friend John Bransford built, who recently passed away. So those conceptual anchors get people into the real world, some fidelity into the real world, some opportunities to think about a situation, a problem, a case, a scenario, and then have them do something with those scenarios that they watched in video or they listened to in the podcast show. And if you're interested in shared online video websites, if you go to my homepage and click on resources, I've got a listing of 70 shared online video websites and a portal for them, whether it's the BBC and short videos there on the economy or interest rates or whatever, or the New York Times talking about homeless or the COVID or suicide or whatever the topic is, TED Talks, as was mentioned earlier, TED Ed, TED for Education. All these are places you can find contents for your instruction. And I recently watched this TED Talk and got so excited, I wrote to the people who Matthew Garcia wrote to him and his website he built to connect experts in music to young kids who don't have access to music teachers and are marginalized students. And it's a fascinating project, and he'll be on Silver Lining. We're going to set up the date. He's written yesterday. So sometimes a TED Talk can lead to other things. You just never know what's going to happen. And this is just this week. My friend Paul Kim, just a couple of days ago, said, I was on TV, national TV in Korea. I can't understand a word. Well, a few English words are in. I can't understand much of it, but I put this down as a possible website for my Korean students to listen to hear about the future of technology and AI and MOOCs and other things that he talks about in it. So how do we use shared online video? Well, I sometimes in a face-to-face class show it and pause it and reflect on it. I sometimes have students yell out concepts that they see in the video And we go through a list of maybe behavioral theory and positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. I might have a video start my lecture or end my lecture as a capstone experience. I might have my video in Canvas, a set of videos they watch, and before they come to my lecture or come to the class discussion, they start the discussion rolling. They might rank the videos that I've been showing every semester, or they might nominate videos. I have something called a cool resource provider, a student who each week for 5 minutes has control over the content, who might find a short video to show, might find an animation clip to show, or a simulation, skip-like simulation. They might take us on a technology demonstration. They might show us different things with a tutorial in certain technologies through video. We might have debates which are supplemented by these videos. And we might interview the video creator themselves. All sorts of ways to use these shared online videos. I'll mention AECT, the Association for Educational Communications and Technology, has a Legends and Legacies website where we can hear from David Jonasson, or we can hear from my friend Marcy Driscoll, the former dean at Florida State, who has a book, Learning for Instruction, or Richard Mayer, his multimedia learning books, or David Merrill in his book on First Principles Instruction. All these people were interviewed by my friends at the AECT. This is headed up by Barbara Lockey at Virginia Tech. And she's got an army of people out there to interview David Jonasson before he passed away. Brilliant man, interested in mind tools and constructionism and structural knowledge. Or my friend Tom Reeves from the University of Georgia on conducting educational design research. All these people, my students in my intro class, are watching and reflecting on. Instead of me lecturing on David Jonasson or lecturing on Tom Reeves, I bring Tom Reeves into my class. I have them watch the video on Tom Reeves, the interview, or on Michael Spector or Robert Gagne or other people. So this is another portal or place in which has a lot of excellent content in a video format, not a podcast format. And so they might write reflection papers on them. Again, they might remix these and create a new video from the remixing. They might rethink education based on what David Jonasson, David Merrill, and Charlie Regaluth and others have said. Part 4. I've just got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to only skip over a few things here. But back in 1995, I got interested in combining video conferencing systems like Zoom and something else. So back then, we're using See You, See Me and PictureTell to bring in guests into our classes. And it just totally whacked students in the side of the head by critiquing their ideas first asynchronously and then bringing them in synchronously to the class session. And so I've used Breeze or Adobe Connect, and I'm going to skip over some of these, but I have many pedagogical uses of video like Zoom, shared online video, like Adobe Connect and other things. One is having a demonstration and then reflecting and questioning on the demonstration. So my friend Mikkel came in from Norway last year to my class to talk about augmented reality and show us his new open access augmented reality software. And my students got to ask him questions. My student Sharon Arahara, who's with us today, her husband was part of the creators of World of Warcraft and other such gaming technology, and he demonstrated some of the technology for us and software he's developed. I have my students, Sam Nadu's with us and Sharonika's with us, have them read their article and then bring them into the class for reflection activities. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sharonika. So it's a great way to get students engaged in the instruction. Terry Anderson was the founder of a journal, the International Review of Open and Distance Learning, of research on open and distance learning. We brought him in a year ago into my class to talk about the evolution of that journal and his history, his career in the field. Or my friend Saul Carliner from Montreal, Concordia University, talking about human performance technology and his career in the field of HPT. We had Charlie Miller, who's sort of in the middle there, talk about his development of Flipgrid at the University of Minnesota. And you all know Flip or Flipgrid today is an international phenomenon. My friend Trong from Fresno State, we had read her article, then we brought her in synchronously. Async first, then synchronously. We brought David Merrill in 15 years ago. Async first. My students hated David Merrill. We brought him in synchronously. They loved him. You know, hearing from him firsthand, seeing that one idea doesn't represent a person and people's ideas can change over time. Ray Schroeder is coming in next Monday. We're going to put his video clips, his articles up on screen and have him talk about. So having figures, tables, graphs, articles, quotes, and having a guest react to the students have selected from the expert, just as a spontaneous discussion, interactive and engaging, where students have to read ahead their publications and ideas. I see I just have a minute or so left. Sometimes have students recommend who to bring in, have them suggest. The guy on the left, Rich Kalata, is the CEO of ISTE. If you don't know ISTE, he was also Obama's director of education, technology in education back in the Obama administration. Make a list of who you know. My friend Punya Mishra does a weekly podcast show. I can bring him in around the world. Who do you know around the world? Bring them into your class. Have a discussion. My friend John Savory is one of the founders of problem-based learning. He's retired now, but he's willing to chat about what PBL is and what the field's like and where it's headed and so forth. Bring them in to talk to your class. Have a discussion. My first graduate student ever at West Virginia came in last semester to update me and my students about what she's doing with healthcare simulations. You know, make a list of who do you know, and sometimes bring a pair in. I brought in Kendam Guyback and Anita Frost last year to talk about instructional design and what they're doing. I brought two people instead of one. I brought my friend Lynn and my former student, you and Joanne from North Texas, to talk about what the field is like, how they got started and how they became a female leader in the field. Richard Mayer came in, probably the best discussion, engaging person. He's the #1 educational psychologist in the world in terms of publications. It was an honor to have him pop in and chat with my students about he was actually an IU Indiana professor, his first job. We found that out. So Vanessa Denon, my former student, just having a live interview with her about her research. My guest canceled, was sick. At the last minute, Vanessa stepped in and said, sure, I'll do it. I'll come in. I'm going to skip over my old friend Tiagi talking about the history of the field. I think I'll skip over. My very first doctoral student, John Gray, I talked to in 20 years. I looked him up on LinkedIn, sent him a note, and he was a guest in my class. I mean, it's just like, this just happens. You know, I said, wonder what happened to John. He's running it every day. He runs every weekend, runs adventures around the world. He's a great guy, really interesting one. And then archive them so students can review them later. And so some of these people have rich stories that they're telling about their lives. Save them. I'll skip over some of these last ones here. I think for the sake of time, one of the things, you can have a panel. I'll just go back for a second. You can have panels of people discussing issues. So that's been popular. And in part 5, archive what you've done. Silver Lining is archived. North Texas archived my talk when I gave one for them. My talks are archived at Traveling EdMen. And then skip over a couple of these. So I brought in all these people last spring in my intro class. And these people, including Richard Mayer, I create a playlist at the end of the semester. So my students have that as a legacy to leave the class with. So this semester, I create a playlist for my dissertation prep class on organizing your dissertation defense, your dissertation proposal, writing tips, all sorts of things. My students were able to go back and listen to Florence Martin or listen to one of the other guests that I had in class. So if you like this talk, go to Contact North webinars. In a couple of weeks, you will hear from other folks, or you can go to the archive talks from the previous months, as Sarah said. One is coming up, is my friend Kyung-Mi Lee is coming up on December 8th. So in a couple of weeks, you can listen to Kyungmi or listen to the archive talks. I want to thank you all for coming. This is the first time through this talk. It's a little bit over, but not too far. My notes are at Training Share. My publications are at Publication Share, and my free books at Tech Variety. I am going to stop this sharing and say, I hope you found some ideas worthwhile in here. Cheryl, thank you, Cheryl. None of these things cost any money, typically. Okay, sure, Ray. Hopefully you got one idea. If I want to put in the chat window maybe one idea that you can use from this, or what's one idea your brain's going here, you're thinking you can use from this session. And then Sarah will start with some questions for me, I think, as I read this. Thanks, Manisha. I'm glad Manisha's in here from the Cree Nation in Alberta. I'm glad that you found the show, Manisha. She has what's micro learning there. Yeah, Sarah.
All right, Curt, we have, we'll do one question and I'll do a quick wrap up as we're going over time here. So Joy has asked, based on your work, do you write or discuss connectivism as learning theory?
It's a great question. And I go both ways. I'll give a lecture one time where I'll say connectivism is a learning theory. The next time I give the lecture, I'll say it's not. I think most the reason why educational psychologists would say it's not, and I'm half educational psychologist. Instructional technologists will say it is, and I'm half instructional technology. So half of me is in agreement. I think if it is a theory, it's still being formed. I think educational psychologists would really say it's an instantiation of social cultural theory. It's really social cultural theory in action with more emphasis on the technology than other theorists have talked about in the past. So yeah, thank you, Cheryl. She's just posted the resources for her students and sends a shout out to Ray. Bonk, thank you so much. She's going to use it in her class. So great. I'm glad to see applications of this. Again, there's lots of possibilities for using open educational resources, OER. The Commonwealth of Learning, COL.org, has published free books on OER. And so I recommend that you take a look at those books. And of course, my friends Sam and Sharonika have a book, Pathways to Open Educational Practices. And so I wrote the foreword to it, but you can take a look. It's a free book. Sharonika will send it. I will send it to you. So there's a lot of free resources on using open education. Go to Contact North. They highlight the book of the week. They highlight Mark Nichols' podcast show. They do a great job between Contact North and the Commonwealth of Learning. Canadians are leading the world ahead. The world is open for learning, and that's what we have to think about. How do we open up learning for our students? We all have the possibility to do so, but do we do it? Do we do it? You know, do we record our sessions and make them archived for future learners? Do we share with each other what's available? Do we write to people who are in the know, like Ray Schroeder, and say, what's coming up? What's coming up, Vicki Cook? What can we use? So, Sam Nadu, thank you for coming, and everyone who is here today, who I didn't mention, Millie, my former visiting scholar. Sarah, any final comment you want to wrap us up with? Because the world's open.
Yes, thank you so much, Curt, for such an engaging session as usual, and for sharing your insights and expertise on using podcasts and videocasts for engaging learning. Lots of great takeaways and a lot of great practical tips that our participants can use in their own practice. So thank you for that. And as Dawn mentioned in the chat, my mind has exploded. So thank you for that. And a big thank you to everyone for joining us today. Lots of great conversation and engagement in the chat. We love seeing that. I posted in the chat the link to Teach Online. where you'll find all our webinars. We have over 125 archived webinars that we've been doing over the last 2 years, all open and free to anyone who wants to watch them and share. So thanks, Curt, for spotlighting that. As Curt mentioned, on October 8th, we have our next webinar, Value for Money, Should Online Education Be Cheaper? So we hope to see you there. So thank again, Curt, for the great session. Thanks everyone for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are. Take care.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye-bye.
Bye.